Welcome to the Training Grounds podcast. My name is Katie. I am your host, and this is part 2 of Women in Coffee History. You don't necessarily have to go back and listen to part 1 for this part to make any sense. However, it is going to give you a larger context of how gender inequality permeates through the entire supply chain, not just currently, but also historically. You could also listen to this one first and then go listen to that one. Totally up to you. For those of you joining me from episode 1, we finished off talking about Erna Knudsen, and I said we will be taking a hard left turn, and we will be. We are going to be touching on a Specialty Coffee Association white paper that goes over gender inequality in coffee growing regions. And this is actually kind of the perfect year to do this because the Food and Agriculture Organization declared 2026 the year of the female farmer. So I am for once actually on time for something. And the only reason that is because it's an entire year. So let's go ahead and talk about this Specialty Coffee Association white paper. So the first question I asked myself was, what's a white paper? And it began with the Millennium Development Goals that were put forth by the UN in the year 2000, which were broad goals for the millennium, like eradicate extreme poverty and hunger. And all I can say to that is, wow, dream big. Because at this point in 2026, I'm going to go ahead and guess that they accidentally miswrote that. And instead of eradicate extreme poverty and hunger, they meant to write exacerbate. But the Specialty Coffee Association became a signatory of these MDGs, or Millennium Development Goals, in 2005. And then in 2012, volunteers from the Specialty Coffee Association's Stability Council started on a project to write a series of papers focused on these global sustainability themes. So these papers, they frame the issue. They explain the relevance to the coffee industry specifically, and then they go ahead and offer case studies and recommendations on the role of industry actors ranging from the coffee producers to baristas and even to coffee consumers to tackle the issue. So this isn't just a long-term paper. We're talking about providing people with real-world examples of how fixing these things actually benefits society in the long run. So between 2012 and 2016, papers on 5 themes were written: food security, gender equality, farm worker inclusion, water security, and climate change. I personally am way too emotionally delicate to read the ones on water security and climate change, but they are all available to download for free. So let's go ahead and talk about Blueprint for Gender Equality in the Coffee Lands, or, as an alternate title, Gender Equality in Coffee, Minimizing the Gender Gap in Agriculture. Female farmers in rural communities bear what is referred to as the double burden. This means that they work much longer days than their male counterparts because they're responsible for both housework and work on the farms. Typically, household responsibilities include child rearing, taking care of the elderly, hauling water, collecting firewood, cooking meals, washing clothes, and cleaning. Focus group discussions with coffee farming couples in Uganda highlighted that women work a disproportionate number of hours compared to men. Men work 8-hour days, while women work 15, including total hours spent on coffee production and household tasks. And I'm no mathematician, so go ahead and correct my numbers here, but if you're working 15 hours a day, that gives you enough time to shower, eat, and sleep. And that's it. Men dominate the transportation and final sale of coffee, and that's a big problem because those are the money-making roles, right? Not picking the coffee cherries, we're going to get into that, but men have taken over all of these roles that actually bring in money, and that exacerbates the disparity in income between men and women. Coffee production begins with a long season of fieldwork, followed by harvesting, cherry processing, and finally, transportation and sales. So women tend to play major roles in those initial stages of the value chain, laboring in the fields, harvesting, processing, and then men typically transport and market the product. And just to break those numbers down for you a bit, women comprise 70% of the workforce in fieldwork and harvesting roles, but only participate in 10% of the in-country trading and exporting roles, with 20 to 30% of farms being owned by women. So clearly, there's some funky numbers there, and I just need to explain this to you right off the bat. Those numbers aren't because women suck. Those numbers are because men are actually the worst. So tasks are increasingly male-dominated as coffee transitions from that raw form and into a value-added product ready for sales and marketing. It is kind of funny to me. If you've listened to my coffee history podcast, you'll know it's the colonizers that take that raw form, turn it into something profitable, and then sell it as a commodity. And so it's really very interesting that these coffee farming regions that have been impacted by colonialism, it's the men that continue to perpetuate this. We are going to dive deeper into that as well. I know I keep saying that. There are a lot of rabbit holes here, so please bear with me. We will be covering everything that I keep talking about. When men receive the money from coffee sales, women have a harder time accessing it. Women generally work for lower wages than men, and in many cases, they work entirely without pay. And their contributions to coffee production are often referred to as invisible. So all of this has put us in a position where, quote unquote, women's roles offer little opportunity for economic advancement, whereas men receive and control a disproportionate amount of income from coffee relative to the work performed. Now, you may be wondering, Katie, you said, I'm so sorry, did you say they're working entirely without pay? Isn't that slavery? And I mean, to you and me, sure. But attitudes towards women in rural coffee communities also contribute to these problems. For example, in Uganda, a prevailing attitude is that women should contribute to coffee farming out of duty, but they should not share in the proceeds from the crop. And this leaves many women entirely dependent on their husbands and their family to provide them with money. And this puts women in situations where, in worst case scenarios, if they're trying to get themselves out of a bad situation, typically one that is domestic violence related, in the worst case scenarios, women siphon off beans to sell on the side so they can have their own income. But if this gets found out, it leads to domestic disputes and to violence. So these women are put in a position where they essentially have to steal in order to provide for themselves because they've been put in a position where there is no other choice. And you might be saying, oh, Katie, can't she go out and get a loan? Can't she open a bank account? Can't she do these other things? Just wait. The 2025 Specialty Coffee Association magazine 23rd issue, there's an article by Dr. Erica Koss, and she discusses her PhD research focused on the experience of women coffee farmers in Kenya. She said, my research demonstrated that coffee depends on women. Women's labor in coffee is essential for Kenya as a nation, for communities, and for households. Yet, in the 21st century, coffee continues to belong to the man, a comment I repeatedly heard from Kenyans, both men and women. One young wife that preferred to stay anonymous said, coffee belongs to the man. Single mothers are lucky because they can keep the money and use it for whatever they need. But when you are married, everything is for the man. Dr. Koss goes on to say, and honestly, Dr. Koss drops a bar here. She goes on to say, the legacy of extractivism remains evident in coffee's global supply chain. One ongoing, often overlooked dimension is that gendered relations were reconstructed under colonialism and are now, at times, perpetuated under neoliberal capitalism. And essentially, what Dr. Koss is saying there is that before I was going to say before the white man ruined everything, but I'm going to reel that back and I'm going to say it a little nicer. Before these nations were invaded by colonists, their social structures looked a lot different. And that makes a lot of sense because patriarchy, that's a white people thing. That is something that we created and that we love. A lot of these cultures in the global south, and especially along the bean belt, used to be equal societies, or even ones where women were in primary roles. And then under colonialism, all of that got restructured. And after the colonists left, none of that went back to the way it was before. Because once the colonists left, the men realized, someone has to step into this role. And so they did. And they just decided to keep that going because it brings in the money, baby. And then she says, for example, the British colonial government enacted a violent agenda in Kenya that included the seizure of land and the separation of families. Historian Dr. Walter Rodney noted that due to colonialism, African women's social, religious, constitutional, and political privileges and rights disappeared, while an economic exploitation continued and was often intensified. So again, men are men. It doesn't matter whether they are in coffee growing regions. It doesn't matter if they are Jabez Burns telling people that women shouldn't even be in the coffee industry. It's a man problem. And we are going to talk about what men specifically can do to fix that. So land ownership also favors men. Women make up just 3 to 20% of landowners in the developing world, even though they comprise 20 to 50% of the agricultural labor, depending on the country. Even with the constitutional right to purchase land, right? It's in the Constitution, they say, okay. Discrimination against women still exists in legal frameworks. In a December 2014 report, Women for Women International noted that the Constitution in the Democratic Republic of the Congo guarantees women the right to access land, but other legislation inhibits that right. So under the modern law, the Code de Famille stipulates that a married woman can purchase land, but only with the permission of her husband. And even then, the document is issued in the husband's name. So for all intents and purposes, that's the husband's land. That's not the woman's land, it's the man's land. Under the customary law in the DRC, women cannot purchase land at all. So while constitutions grant equal rights, those rights are often superseded by tradition. You may be saying, Katie, what is customary law and why on earth would it supersede the Constitution? And the answer is very simple. It's because customary law is more beneficial to men. Customary law is just rooted in those unwritten, unspoken cultural values that are passed down through generation to generation, and those things take precedent. So if we have subjugated women, even if the Constitution puts them on even footing, we're still going to subjugate them because subjugating them continues this pattern where we get to have power and money and enforce that power and hold that money over the women so we can control them. It's about control and power. So tradition also makes it difficult for women to inherit land. Even when laws permit it, laws don't matter, guys. I'm so sorry. It's insane. If you study law, are you okay right now? Just checking in. This is particularly problematic in countries where widows are prevalent due to armed conflict or disease. I wonder who caused those armed conflicts and diseases. I bet I can guess. And then those women need to provide for their families and children. Like they don't just fuck off and die. They have to provide. So plots will go to male relatives on the side of the husband, leaving the widow and children with no land for food or cash crops. They're fucked. Women in rural agricultural societies also have more difficulty accessing credit than men. So you say, oh, Katie, they can just buy land. Oh, Katie, they can just get some credit. No, they can't. So without access to credit, women have difficulty purchasing land. And then when land is obtained, they lack the resources to farm and maintain it because you need money to run a farm. And even when women do own land, they are often allotted smaller and less fertile plots or just fewer trees, which is bullshit, by the way. In her Specialty Coffee Association article, Dr. Koss shares, "When I visited the coffee farm of a widow in Western Kenya with 10 children, I asked her, 'What do you want me to tell people who drink coffee?' She paused for a moment, answering, 'Tell them it's hard work picking, processing, all the way up to when we wait for the money. Tell them all the facts. Tell them we women are willing to work hard, and we do.' As I took notes, she added, 'But we need the goodwill of men to give us land.'" All of these compounding economic obstacles have led to a gap in coffee income. Isn't that crazy? It's almost like when you keep putting someone in a position to fail, they're gonna fail. When something is systemic, you cannot beat it. The system has to be torn down. Across 7 East African producer organizations, the gap between male and female income was 39%. Men take home roughly $716 annually compared to $440 for women. And yes, I did say annually. I don't know if you know this, but most smallholder coffee farmers are not even living above the poverty line. So $716 annually sounds about right. $440 is bullshit. In a leadership and decision-making context within a household, decision-making power is linked to control of income and ownership of assets. So that means the men take control of decisions. Because they've given themselves control of everything else, they also now have to be in charge of the decisions at home, while the woman is providing a majority of the labor, even at home. On a cooperative level, women are often barred from membership because they aren't landowners, they can't afford the cost of membership, or they feel uncomfortable attending meetings due to cultural prejudice. And yeah, that makes sense. If this whole system has been set up against you, as soon as you sit yourself at that table uninvited, essentially, no one's going to want to nurture you. No one's going to want to mentor you and help you along the way and make your life any easier. A female coffee farmer interviewed by Dr. Koss shared, "To join a cooperative, a farmer needs to own 5 acres of land, and this is only possible if a husband gives this to his wife." In Kenya, land ownership is required to be a member of a cooperative. It's often required to open a bank account, obtain loans or credit, or receive payment for coffee cherries. Land ownership shuts these women out of all of these economic opportunities. While women are increasingly present at cupping tables at origin, they're rarely included as association leaders or farm managers or owners, so we keep them just visible enough to keep people off our backs, but we're not actually giving them any opportunities that would lead to economic advancement, because God forbid a woman get her bag. And then in cases when women do obtain leadership positions, they lack the training and support to be effective in their roles. Like I said, these women are going into a system that is designed to reject them, essentially. They also rarely occupy key leadership positions in policy-making organizations and representative bodies like the Ministry of Agriculture and local regional producer organizations. And this widespread lack of participation is especially problematic because these organizations, they're tasked with addressing the gender gap within agriculture. Do we really understand the gender gap within agriculture if no women are on the committee going over the gender gap within agriculture? I'll let you sit with that one for a second. So I've talked about all of those horrible, terrible, awful things, but what do women bring to the table? If we do include the women, what happens? Has anybody considered that it may blow up the world, that we all may die and explode and our faces will light on fire? Actually, promoting gender equality in coffee growing regions can improve coffee quality, increase productivity, and promote rural economic development. It's almost like women make things better, you guys. It's almost like having more eyes on something makes that product better. Investing simultaneously in gender equality and technical training leads to improvements in the coffee value chain with regards to quality and consistency because it allows women to access information they need to produce better coffee. This is basically what Erna Knudsen was doing. She knew that you couldn't get ahead if you didn't have the knowledge. For example, Bukanzo Joint Coffee Co-op increased the average cupping score upon arrival of their entire production from 79 points to 85.75 points over a 4-year period as a result of deliberately including women in technical training in addition to men. They strive to keep improving quality through work in gender equality. Men in the cooperative are engaging more in fieldwork and harvesting. Women are engaging more knowledgeably in coffee production at every level of the trade. And this just creates a higher quality output. Work in women's empowerment can also increase productivity by allowing women access to resources and information. According to the Food and Agriculture Organization, women could increase their agricultural output by 20 to 30% if granted the same access to land, finances, and technology as men. It means that if women have better access to agricultural inputs, they can engage in more productive agricultural practices. And this has potential to increase both their food production as well as coffee production, thereby improving both food security and income. According to the World Bank, financially empowering women in rural areas promotes economic growth and helps alleviate poverty. Several studies, including from the Food and Agriculture Organization, find that women spend virtually all of their income from agricultural work on household needs, like nutrition, school fees, clothing, healthcare, home improvements. Men spend 25% or more of their income on consumables. And I just want you to sit for a moment with what I just said about poverty in these coffee growing regions. And I'm not saying that they did this to themselves. We all know these countries were destabilized by foreign governments. So I am absolutely not blaming them in that regard. However, at some point you have to step up and realize we can't just keep squandering our money. We have to reinvest in the community and in our families. Women reinvest 90% of their earnings into the household, helping the family break out of generational poverty. That is huge. That is so important. Their economic empowerment has positive outcomes. It's only positives for families and the entire community. So the paper really only touches on inequality in coffee growing regions, and there's not a lot of information on inequality in the other parts of the supply chain, the parts that the average barista, you and me, would probably come into contact with. But what we do know is that inequalities, they don't end on the farm. And if you listen to part 1, you know that these inequalities have been in the coffee industry since day one, essentially. In trading and roasting, women are still underrepresented, with men making up 75% of all roasters. Roasting is kind of a sausage fest. Same with the espresso machine technicians. That's also a heavily male-dominated career. And let me tell you, I've never had a bad experience with a female espresso machine tech, but I've had many a unpleasant experience with male ones, and it's usually in the form of very condescending speaking and behaviors. And even though the role of barista is overwhelmingly held by women, men are often promoted to management roles and given opportunities for education and advancement above their female coworkers. That one speaks for itself, right? I've certainly worked for companies that put their male employees over their female employees at every opportunity. In competitions, the representation is also pretty bleak. The World Barista Championship didn't have a woman win until 2018, and the competition began in 2000. The World Coffee Roasting Championship has never been won by a woman, and it began in 2000. And just knowing what we know about Jabez Burns and the way that he essentially baked misogyny into the coffee industry, and particularly into roasting. So the fact that a woman has never won, that doesn't surprise me. There have been advancements on judging panels, I will say that, but they are still frequently majority male. And this becomes problematic when things like appropriate dress and professionalism are criteria taken into consideration, because that brings into question judges' implicit biases. And this especially would impact Black women at a greater degree, because I can see where a Black woman speaking confidently and knowledgeably about a subject could be taken by a white man as aggressive or intimidating or somehow condescending when it's just a woman of color speaking confidently about something she knows. Also, let's just talk about competitions a little bit more. Competing is expensive. You have to fly to places pretty regularly throughout the year in order to go to new levels of these competitions. You have to pay for travel. You have to pay for accommodations. There's entry fees. Most of us competing in these things are baristas. We're making barista money, and this is especially an issue when women are still making 84 cents for every dollar a man makes. As of 2025, the World Economic Forum reports it will take 123 years to reach full parity. So maybe in 123 years, I will be able to compete. A lot of responsibility to open the doors to women, unfortunately, lies with men. And historically, it hasn't really worked out for us. Syrian Burry says in her 2015 Sprudge interview, the people who are mostly in the position of getting knowledge about the product, about extraction, about different coffee origins are still men. As they have the knowledge, it's up to them who they share that knowledge with. That's that similar struggle to what's happening in coffee growing regions. That is the issue in coffee roasting. And that is the thing that Erna Knudsen was trying so hard to overcome, was this gatekeeping by men. And that's also why it really grinds my gears that the Specialty Coffee Association has become so unattainably expensive. It came from the mind of this woman that wanted to open doors, especially for women. And it just feels like it's something that fell into the hands of men and, surprise, surprise, got ruined so a small amount of men can make a large amount of money. And again, I do know that what I am saying sounds really rude to the SCA, and they have done incredible things for coffee. And obviously, I have a lot of respect for Erna Knudsen and where the SCA came from, but we can hold two truths at the same time. As a woman in the industry, it can be isolating. It can be really frustrating because you come up to these opportunities and a lot of the time you are met by a man, and it's a toss up on if that man is going to be good and share knowledge with you, or if he's going to be the classic coffee dude bro talking about, oh, I'm going to ghost steam this, and it's a Liberica, it's got tastes of the co-fermented strawberries, and yeah, maybe, you just haven't done enough cuppings. Your palate can develop eventually. Mine is pretty developed. I'm taking the exam to become a Q grader, so I know how to triangulate. I don't want to talk to you. I don't want anything to do with you. I've gone to Coffee Fest in New York, and when I went last year, I remember some of my most unpleasant experiences were at roaster booths, because it's always a dude bro. They didn't even give me the fucking time of day. I was standing there looking like a dumbass until finally somebody's like, hi, can I help you? Are you lost, little girl? Was essentially the vibe they were giving. And it was bellwether. I'm gonna just call them out right now. It was bellwether, okay? I don't know what that vibe is, but I don't like it. However, when I went this year, I decided to avoid all of those booths. And I only went to the booths with the girls, gays, and theys. And I had a infinitely better experience this year than I did last year, simply because I decided to stop dealing with the bullshit of men that I don't give a fuck about. And I guess really what I'm trying to say here is a piece of wisdom I got from Coffee Fest, and that is no one is ever going to sit you down and say, you've made it. You're a coffee professional now. That's never going to happen. This isn't that kind of industry. And unfortunately, a lot of women do look to the men to give them that kind of validation. The only person that can give you the validation is yourself. If you have been working and striving and developing in this industry outside of it just being a side gig or a survival job before you get your big break, you're a coffee professional. I give you the permission to call yourself a coffee professional. Give yourself the permission to expand your knowledge. Don't wait for somebody to give it to you. Go out and seek it. There are so many resources. Obviously, if you're listening to this podcast, you're definitely a coffee professional because I'm fucking nobody and you're listening. But there are also great resources. There are so many coffee podcasts. Raise the Bar has a Patreon where you can take coffee classes like every month. Go out, educate yourself, expand your knowledge, challenge yourself. Also, in terms of the language that we use when we talk about coffee, in one of these articles, there was a woman and she was talking about how we keep referring to coffee farmers as men. And that's just simply out of habit, but we need to change our language, right? We need to stop centering men, essentially. Because if we can kind of shift that Overton window, so to speak, it is going to do a great deal for women's empowerment. If you are a man and you are listening to this, give women opportunities. Open up your knowledge to them. Don't gatekeep just because you don't think, oh, they're going to squander the opportunity or the knowledge. Who gives a fuck? You still have the knowledge. It's not like they take it out of your brain and go and light it on fire and it's gone forever. Share the knowledge. It doesn't matter if that person goes on to use it to better themselves or if they just don't give a fuck and move on. That's fine. But you have to get over yourself and you have to open up yourself to the possibility that women can help and that women can improve the industry at large. Because on a hard data level, we know that to be the case. The way that we speak to people just generally about coffee, men or women, a big part of our industry needs to change the way we talk about things because we're just making everything inaccessible and kind of doing this weird ivory tower thing. And that's not good for anybody. That's not good for you, me, the coffee producers, anybody. All it does is make you feel superior and smart and better than. And that's not really anything. I have been so lucky to have men in the industry that have really shared information with me and made me a more knowledgeable and better barista. I truly do owe a lot of my knowledge to the coffee wholesale account managers that I've worked directly with, and I've learned a lot just from other friends in the industry that are men, and I do appreciate that. So if you are listening, thank you for not sucking. That was really cool of you to do. So I think that kind of takes us to the end of my manifesto, so to speak. As you know, I'll see you when I see you. I can't guarantee that's gonna be soon, but hopefully it will be before the end of this year. I do intend on making these a little bit more regular since my life has kind of evened out a little since last year. As always, thank you for tuning in, and if you're listening to this on your way to work, have a great shift.